My name is Ryan Reagan. I'm with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game Division of Sportfish. In this video, we're going to cover how to tie a jig to be used for ice fishing. When we cover this jig here, this jig can also be used in open water season for rainbow trout, even for coho salmon. It's modeled after a twitching jig or an arrow jig, but again, when used for ice fishing, it's quite effective. So before we get started, we'll go cover a list of materials. We're using this completed fly here to demonstrate some of the materials that we're going to use today. We'll start with the finesse jig head. This happens to be a 1/8 ounce finesse jig, store-bought. You can buy these. They come in various colors, sizes, weights, all that stuff. For our thread, we're using a 210 denier. A heavy, strong thread is really what you want. The color we're using today is this pink. We've got a section here of cross-cut rabbit strip. We've got this one here. It happens to be a two-tone, pink and purple. You can go with a solid or any two-tone color you want based on the color of your fly that you like. And for the tail section, we're using a zonker cut rabbit strip here in purple. And we've got a couple of feathers here of marabou, one pink and one purple. And the last thing we're going to use is some crystal flash. This is pink. I've used purple, I've used clear, I've used various other colors to construct this fly, so use your own creativity in doing this fly. We'll get started by applying a thread base here on our hook, and as we covered in the materials list, this is a weighted jig head here. It happens to be a finesse style jig head, but again, you can use whatever style jig head you want in whatever size you want. The first material we're going to tie in is going to be a section of our purple rabbit strip here. This is going to act more of as a tail, and we'll tie this in just overhand wraps, making sure that I like to cut a little bit more on the back of the tail. You can always take material off if you find that you've got a little too much, but I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Now, as far as size go, that tail's probably a little bit longer than the actual hook itself, and for that reason, I'm just going to take a little bit off. I basically want it to be about the same size as the length of the shank of the hook as well as the jig head. Now that we have our back tail section tied in, we're going to go ahead and take our two marabou feathers here. You can see I've got pink and purple. I like to lay these on top of each other. We're going to tie these in simultaneously. So when I lay them in, I just basically try to find the top of the feather vein and gently just kind of palmer those out. You can see here I'm just basically one on top of the other, and it doesn't matter which color you go with. Purple can be on the top or the bottom, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to go ahead and take that section. You can see I've just separated those fibers in there, and I'm going to lay that right down there where my thread base is. Put a couple securing wraps, come in, pull everything back, and wrap back on itself just a bit. We're going to come forward to about 3/4 of the way up. I'll just go ahead and stop there. And what we're going to do with these is we're going to grab both ends, and when we wrap these, we would do forward wraps, and with each turn, we basically pull the feather material back so it doesn't crowd, it doesn't get caught up. Basically, we're going for a lot of body on this. And these marabou feathers really give the jig a lot of action when it's fished. And once we've reached our thread here, we're going to go ahead and make sure all the feathers are out. We're going to give a couple securing wraps. It looks messy right now, and that's okay, because we're going to work all this stuff out a little bit later. Come in here and trim off the excess material, dispose of it, pull everything back a couple of times. You can see I've got a good list of you can see I've left myself enough material up here where I can take my thread and kind of wrap in there and secure everything. Again, I'll wrap back on that just a bit, make sure the material folds back on itself. Now that we have our two marabou feathers secured in there, we're going to grab our flash material, crystal flash, and we're going to tie it on both sides of the hook, starting with this side, and then we'll just go with that side. So we're going to take it and pinch enough where it basically goes to the full length of the materials that we have on the jig right now. Come in, a couple of loose wraps, pull our material up and over. Now on this side here, I'll flip the vise over. I've got a little bit more in terms of length. It's coming past my material. Simply just going to cut that off, basically making it in line with the other side. At this point, we're going to take our cross-cut zonker strip here. You can see this has pink with purple tips. You can use whatever color works for you in terms of the design of the fly. What I like to do first when I lay this on is make sure that the material is going to lay back. If I laid it on this way and tried to wrap forward, you can see the material goes toward the head. I don't want that, so that gives me an indication as to where I need to tie this in, which is going to be this right here. So I'm just going to simply lay this down, come in with a couple of loose wraps, and I like to fold this material over on itself and secure it down even further. I just feel like it just gives it a lot more security. And wrap all the way to the jig head. So what I'm going to do is take this, palmering all that material back. I'm simply going to do adjacent forward wraps, and then I'm going to make sure that material lays down evenly. And once I've reached my stopping point, I'm going to pull slightly, pulling up on that material, and I'm going to wrap it down. And I'm going to come in with a couple of securing wraps up there. I'm going to clip the excess off, clipping it close to the shank of the hook, just behind the jig head. Now what I like to do with these jigs is I like to wrap my thread back a good amount and give it a more pronounced section here of thread. I use a lot of thread here and really wrap that down. What I'm trying to do here is trying to build up a nice base of thread here. Now at this point, I'm going to take my whip finisher, apply a couple whip finishes to this fly or this jig, and by all accounts, this guy's done. However, what I'll do in order to secure that thread more tightly right there is I'm going to come in and add a couple drops of super glue. Now you can use UV epoxy, you could use head cement. I just so happen to have a tube of super glue sitting here, and as it's drying I just make sure that the super glue doesn't drip on itself, and after it's dried, pull this out. But that's your custom-made marabou jig that we can use again for ice fishing or for open water fishing for rainbow trout and even coho salmon. Hope you enjoyed this video. Good luck fishing, and we'll see you on the water.